At 3 a.m., I was on my way to the airport to surprise my son before his flight. As soon as our Uber pulled into a dark corner near the terminal, the driver suddenly locked all four doors. His eyes met mine in the rearview mirror. "Don't get out here, sir," he whispered. Why, I demanded. He glanced at me through the mirror and said, "Just trust me." 5 agonizing minutes later, 4 police cruisers surrounded our car. Then I saw who they were chasing and realized my trip to the airport had never been a coincidence. Thank you for being here with me. Before we dive into this story, drop a quick comment and let me know, what are you doing while you listen? Driving, working, or just taking a moment for yourself? I appreciate you. One quick note. Some details here have been adapted for storytelling, but the lesson at its heart is what truly matters. There are nights when the silence in a house speaks louder than any voice ever could, and the 8th anniversary of my wife's death was one of them. I woke at 3 in the morning with Susan's name caught in my throat. The bedroom felt too big, too empty, the way it had for 8 years since the accident took her from me. I'm Jerry Hart, 60 years old, and for the past 8 years, I've lived alone in this Queen Anne Hill house that once held a family. Sleep wouldn't return. It never did on July 12th. I wandered downstairs in my robe, bare feet, silent on hardwood floors. The living room held shadows and moonlight in equal measure. Susan's photo sat on the mantel where it had for 8 years, her smile frozen in time, my heart frozen with it. I stopped in front of it, touching the silver frame. 8 years today, I whispered to her image. I still don't know how to do this without you. The house offered no answer, just the hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of rain against windows, the creak of old bones settling. I drifted down the hallway toward the back of the house, past the guest room that hadn't seen guests in years. The door to my son's old study stood half-open light from the street lamp, casting a pale rectangle across his desk. Everett, my son, 35 years old, and the COO of the company I built had been staying in his old room for the past few weeks to handle some business matters. He said it was easier than the commute from his place downtown. I was grateful for the company, even if we mostly passed each other like ships at different schedules. On his desk sat a printed itinerary neatly centered on the leather blotter. Chicago, departure 5:45 a.m. Return Sunday evening. The paper was perfectly aligned corners parallel to the desk edges like it had been placed there with a ruler. I picked it up, scanning the details. United Airlines, meetings with potential investors, hotel confirmation. Everything organized the way Everett always organized things, meticulous, careful, professional. But something nagged at me. The placement was too perfect, too visible, almost like it was meant to be found. I shook my head, setting it back down exactly as I'd found it. Paranoia at 3 in the morning, that's all it was. Grief playing tricks. Still looking at that itinerary, a thought struck me with unexpected force. When was the last time I'd surprised him? When was the last time I'd done anything spontaneous with my son? We talked business over dinner, exchanged updates about the company, maintained the comfortable distance of 2 men who loved each other but didn't quite know how to show it anymore. Susan used to say I worked too much, loved too quietly. She was right. She was always right. The decision formed before I could second guess it. I would go to the airport. I would see him off properly. Maybe grab coffee together before his flight, tell him I loved him, break through the careful walls we'd both built. "I'm going to see our son Susan," I said to the empty house, "just to say I love him." I pulled out my phone and opened the Uber app. At 3:15 in the morning, I half expected a long wait, but a car appeared on the map almost immediately. Black sedan. 4.9 stars. 5 minutes away. I dressed quickly, jeans, a sweater, my raincoat. By the time I reached the front door, the app showed the car pulling up outside. The black sedan idled at the curb wipers, cutting slow arcs through the drizzle. I climbed into the back seat, grateful for the warmth. The driver was a silver-haired man in his late 50s with serious, watchful eyes. He nodded once when I entered, but said nothing. No greeting, no weather small talk, just a brief acknowledgement of my existence. "SeaTac, please," I said, settling into the leather seat. "Departures terminal." Another nod. He pulled away from the curb with smooth precision. I tried conversation as we merged onto the empty streets. "Been driving long tonight?" Silence. His eyes remained fixed ahead, flicking occasionally to the mirrors. I leaned back, pulling out my phone. Maybe Everett was awake, preparing for his early flight. I dialed his number, straight to voicemail. his recorded voice professional and distant. "You've reached Everett Hart. Leave a message." "Hey, it's Dad," I said after the beep. "I know it's early. Call me when you get this." We merged onto 5. South the highway, nearly deserted at this hour. Streetlights painted orange stripes across the sedan's interior. Rain fell steadily now, drumming on the roof. That's when I started noticing the pattern. The driver's eyes moved in a constant cycle rearview mirror. Left side, mirror, right side, mirror, road ahead. Rear view, left, right, forward. Every 10 seconds like clockwork. Not the casual glances of a tired driver, but the systematic scanning of someone trained in surveillance. When did I become the kind of man who notices mirror patterns in an Uber driver at 3 in the morning? I dialed Everett again. Voicemail. A third time. Nothing. The driver's hands gripped the wheel at 10. And 2, never relaxing, never adjusting the radio that stayed silent. No music, no podcast, no news. Just the engine's hum and the rain and the rhythmic squeak of wipers. Airport exit signs began appearing overhead. 1 mile, half mile, SeaTac International, straight ahead its terminals glowing like a small city in the pre-dawn darkness. But the driver's posture changed. His shoulders tensed. His jaw tightened. We passed the first exit for departures. I leaned forward. "Excuse me, the departures terminal is back that way." He turned instead onto a dark access road, away from the bright terminals, away from the light and people and safety. The road curved between massive concrete support pillars for the elevated roadways above. No other cars, no pedestrians, just wet pavement reflecting our headlights and shadows stretching long and wrong. My breath caught in my chest. "Sir, where are we going? This isn't..." The car slowed as we entered a dark corner of the airport grounds. A massive concrete pillar loomed ahead. No terminal lights, no other vehicles. Just emptiness and rain and the sudden crushing realization that something was very wrong. My hand shot to the door handle. That's when I heard it 4 simultaneous clicks as all the doors locked at once. The 4 locks clicked simultaneously, sharp, final, mechanical. My hand froze on the door handle. "Let me out." I yanked the handle hard, then harder. Nothing. The window controls were dead. Every door sealed. "What are you doing? Let me out." The driver's voice came for the first time low and tense, but not threatening. "Sir, please, don't get out. Trust me. You'll understand in 5 minutes." 5 minutes? Are you insane? My heart hammered against my ribs. I considered breaking the window with my phone screaming, fighting. But something in his tone, not menace but urgency, made me hesitate. "Please," he said, again hands still on the wheel eyes, scanning the darkness outside the car. 5 minutes. I need you to stay inside. It's not safe out there. Not safe out there. But I was locked in here with a stranger who'd driven me to an abandoned corner of the airport at 3:41 in the morning. Except his body language was all wrong for a threat. He wasn't turned toward me. His attention was fixed outward toward the shadows between the concrete pillars. His posture was protective, not predatory. Like he was watching for something. Or someone. The realization hit me with strange clarity. This man wasn't trying to hurt me. He was trying to keep me from getting out. "Who are you?" I managed my voice steadier now. 5 minutes, he repeated. "Watch the clock." I looked at the dashboard. 3:41 a.m. The glowing numbers felt like a countdown to something I couldn't name. So I sat, trapped, helpless, watching those numbers change with agonizing slowness while rain drummed on the roof and my breath fogged the windows. 3:42. The driver remained motionless, a statue carved from tension and stillness. His eyes never stopped moving, mirrors, shadows, pillars, the curve of the access road behind us. 3:43. I found myself whispering to Susan, as if she could still hear prayers in whatever place she'd gone. "If I don't make it home, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for all of it." 3:44. My hands were shaking. When had they started shaking? 3:45. 3 minutes felt like 3 hours. 4 minutes felt like dying slowly. At 4.5, I stopped believing in the 5. 3:46. Red and blue lights exploded from 3 directions at once. Police cruisers, 4 of them, roared in from separate access roads, boxing us in with choreographed precision. Officers poured out weapons, drawn flashlight beams cutting through rain and darkness. But they weren't coming toward our car. They surged past us toward the massive concrete pillar 30 feet ahead. Toward a shape I hadn't even seen in the shadows, a man pressed against the pillar dressed in black, something metallic glinting in his hand. Seattle PD dropped the weapon hands where we can see them. The man went down hard. Officers swarmed him. A knife skittered across wet pavement. Something else rolled free, a small glass vial that caught the red-blue flashing lights. Even through the closed windows, I caught a sharp chemical smell that made my throat tighten. Chloroform. The locks on our car released with a soft click. A woman in a dark jacket and jeans approached the driver's window. He rolled it down. She held up a badge that gleamed in the police lights, Detective Shelby Hewitt, 44 years old, with sharp, intelligent eyes that had seen too much. "Cedric," she said, voice clipped and professional. "Good work. We got him clean weapon chloroform the works." She nodded. "Yates is going downtown. We'll need statements from both of you." I stared at the scene unfolding outside. Officers were hauling the man to his feet, cuffing him. Even in the chaos and flashing lights, I caught details 38, maybe 40 years old. Lean build, dead eyes that showed nothing. Later, I would learn his name was Zane Yates, professional gambler with an assault conviction and expensive habits that made him available for hire. How do you process the moment when the stranger you feared is the only thing standing between you and a knife in the dark? The driver turned around finally, and I saw his face clearly for the first time under the dome light. Silver hair, late 50s, weathered features that suggested a life of hard decisions. He extended a card toward me with steady hands. "You're safe now, Mr. Hart," he said, exhaustion evident in every syllable. "I know this makes no sense yet." I took the card, hands still trembling. Cedric Bailey, licensed Washington State private investigator. The name triggered a memory that took a moment to surface through the shock. "Bailey," I said slowly. "Cedric Bailey, you worked for me." 12 years ago, he confirmed. "Head of security for Hart Logistics. You probably don't remember you had 400 employees. But I did remember. Quiet man, competent, left for a better opportunity with a security firm. We'd shaken hands at his going-away lunch. Why are you driving for Uber?" The question came out flat, my brain struggling to connect dots that made no sense. "Why are you... what is this?" "I'm not really driving for Uber," he said. "I've been watching you for 3 weeks. Tonight I got word about Yates. I couldn't let you leave the house alone." Outside, they were loading the assassin into a cruiser, an assassin who'd been waiting for me. At 3:46 in the morning, in the exact place an Uber would have dropped me off if I'd asked for departures and gotten out when I wanted to. If Cedric hadn't locked the doors. If he hadn't made me wait 5 minutes. "Someone paid him to kill you," Cedric said quietly. "We have evidence. Not enough to make arrests yet, but enough to know you're in danger." Who? The word came out as a whisper. "Who would?" "I can't tell you that here." He put the car in drive, pulling away from the flashing lights and the man who'd been hired to end my life. "But there's an envelope on the seat beside you. I placed it there before you got in. I needed you to have it tonight no matter what happened." I looked down at the seat beside me. A thick envelope lay there, unsealed corners worn from handling. I hadn't noticed it in the darkness and chaos. When had he? "Read those," Cedric said, eyes back on the road. "Then we'll talk about who hired Yates and why they want you dead." The documents crinkled under my fingers as I pulled them out. The envelope in my coat pocket was thick, heavy with photographs and documents I'd never seen before. My fingers trembled as I pulled them out under the dome light, while Cedric drove away from the flashing police lights. The first photograph stopped my breath. Vivian, my daughter-in-law, standing in my hallway. My hallway. The timestamp read July 11th, 2024, 2:47 p.m. Yesterday afternoon, while I was at the office. She wore the blue cardigan I'd seen at dinner last week, her expression focused and purposeful, as she walked toward Everett's study. The second photo showed her at Everett's desk, placing something down with careful precision, the business itinerary. 3 months ago, Cedric said quietly, eyes on the dark road. "Someone close to Everett contacted me, anonymous. They feared for your life, but couldn't come forward directly. That's when I started watching." I shuffled to the next photograph. Vivian leaving the house, checking her watch. The itinerary perfectly centered on the desk blotter, visible, impossible to miss. "She knew," I whispered. "She knew I'd find it." "She knew what day it was," Cedric confirmed. "8th anniversary of your wife's death. She understood you'd be vulnerable, emotional. When you saw that itinerary, what did you do?" "I decided to surprise him at the airport." The words tasted like ash. "I wanted to see my son, to tell him I loved him. And she knew you would." Cedric's voice was gentle but relentless. "That itinerary wasn't left accidentally. It was bait, Timed specifically for the anniversary, placed where you'd find it designed to trigger exactly the spontaneous decision you made. The next documents were financial records, bank statements with highlighted transactions. I recognized Everett's business account number. I'd helped him set it up 5 years ago. 10 days ago, transferred a phone number ending in 4738. $15,000. Cedric tapped the page. That number belongs to Zane Yates, your son's friend from the Tacoma casino circuit. They met through illegal online gambling sites 2 years ago. $15,000 to hire an assassin from my son's account 10 days ago. I thought about every breakfast Everett and I shared these past weeks, me trusting him, waiting for whatever those pills would do. And the anonymous source that I managed, who, I can't tell you that yet. They're still in danger, but they gave me enough to start documenting everything. He gestured to the thick stack of papers. 3 months of surveillance, every meeting between Everett and Yates, every time Vivienne entered your house when you weren't home. The paper trail is solid. We drove in silence through empty Seattle streets, pre-dawn darkness giving way to gray. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I need you to do something when we get home, Cedric said as we turned onto my street. Something that might be difficult. 5:30 in the morning. The house was dark when we pulled into the driveway. Cedric came inside with me, moving with quiet efficiency. "The supplements," he said. "The ones Everett brought you? Where are they?" My stomach dropped. "The medicine cabinet. Why, get them. All of them. Everything he's given you in the past few months." I climbed the stairs to the bathroom on legs that felt disconnected from my body. Opened the cabinet. 4 bottles lined the shelf, professional labels gleaming under the bathroom light. Memory support formula, cognitive clarity, senior brain health, premium omega complex. I carried them downstairs, where Cedric had spread plastic Ziploc bags on the kitchen counter, each labeled with dates and times in black marker. "Read them to me," he said, pulling on latex gloves. I read each label aloud, my voice sounding strange in my own ears. Memory support, cognitive clarity. Everett said these were expensive, the best formulas for my age. He researched them specifically for men over 55. Cedric sealed each bottle in a separate bag with methodical care. "These go to your family doctor for a medical order, then to a certified forensic toxicology lab, chain of custody. If there's anything in these that shouldn't be there, we'll have admissible evidence." How many mornings had I swallowed those capsules with my coffee, grateful that my son cared about my health? "Have you been taking them?" Cedric asked, not looking up from his labeling. The question hung in the air like poison gas. "Yes," my voice cracked. "The first bottle, 6 weeks now, every morning with breakfast." Cedric's hands stilled. His face, when he looked up, showed the careful blankness of someone delivering terrible news. "How do you feel? Any symptoms? Confusion, memory, issues, fatigue?" "I've been tired," I admitted. "But I thought I'm 60. I thought it was just age." He sealed the last bag and placed all 4 in a locked metal evidence box. "From this moment forward, don't consume anything you didn't buy and open yourself. Nothing Everett brings you, nothing Vivienne prepares, nothing that was in your house before this conversation. Do you understand?" I nodded, unable to speak. The poison wasn't waiting at the airport. It was already inside me, had been for 6 weeks. Every pill I took with gratitude every morning, my son watched me swallow them. Every "I love you, Dad" delivered, while he slowly killed me. "I need to leave before Everett comes home," Cedric said, checking his watch. "But first," he pulled out his phone, swiped to a message, and turned the screen toward me. The text was time-stamped 6:30 a.m. that morning. Sender Everett Hart. My son's words glowed on the screen, and with them a detail that changed everything. "This is why," Cedric said quietly, "I need you to stay calm when your son walks through that door in 15 minutes. The text on Cedric's phone was brief, sent at 6:30 that morning, 20 minutes ago. "There's a problem, big one. I'll explain later. Don't know why? Yeah, I understand. Coming home right away." From Everett's phone to someone I couldn't see. But Cedric's face told me everything I needed to know about who that someone was. "He's not in charge," I whispered. "No," Cedric confirmed. "He's reporting to her. Always has been. She gives orders. He follows." That text was sent right after Yates's arrest hit the police scanner. She knows the plan failed. Vivienne, 33 years old, married to my son for 7 years, and apparently the architect of my murder. Cedric checked his watch. "I need to leave before he gets here. Can you act normal?" Surprised to see him home early from Chicago. "Oined," Dajamoy spaced. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Text me at 9. We'll coordinate next steps. He gathered the evidence box and slipped out through the kitchen door at 6:45. I was alone in my house for 5 minutes before I heard the garage door open. I moved quickly to the living room couch, pulled Susan's old knit blanket over myself, closed my eyes. My heart hammered so hard, I was certain it would give me away. Footsteps through the garage door, quick, hurried. Everett didn't call out for me the way he usually did. Instead, silence. Then the sound of him dialing his phone. It's me. His voice was low, tense. There's a problem. Big one. Pause. I'll explain when I get there, but Yates got arrested at the airport. Seattle PD has him. Longer pause. I kept my breathing steady, shallow the rhythm of sleep. No, nothing to do with him. Dad's probably asleep upstairs. He never wakes up this early. Another pause. I don't know why Yates was there. Maybe he got cold feet. Maybe Dad changed his mind about the surprise trip. I don't know. Footsteps moved closer to the couch. I willed every muscle in my body to stay relaxed. Yeah, I understand. I'm leaving now. Coming home right away. He ended the call, stood there for what felt like an eternity. I could sense him watching me, checking if I was really asleep. My pulse roared in my ears. Then his footsteps retreated. Up the stairs, his bedroom door closed. I lay there listening to my son plot with someone else and realized I'd been sleeping through my own assassination for months. 5 minutes passed. 10. Finally, I opened my eyes and pulled out my phone with shaking hands. Need to meet at 9. More to discuss. Cedric's reply came instantly. Eastlake Clinic first. Dr. Merrick at 9. My office at 10:30 for Willard. At 9 o'clock, I sat in Dr. Alan Merrick's private examination room on the 3rd floor of a quiet Eastlake medical building. My physician for the past decade, now in his early 60s with silver hair and steady hands, listened to my explanation with the careful attention of someone who understood the legal weight of what I was asking. You believe these supplements may contain something harmful? He said, not a question. I believe my son may be trying to kill me. I said the words strange and terrible in my mouth. Dr. Merrick didn't flinch. I'll draw a full blood panel, liver function, kidney function, and neurological markers. And I'll submit these vials to NMS Labs in Pennsylvania. They're the certified forensic toxicology lab we use for cases that may go to court. He sealed each of the 4 bagged supplements in new evidence bags with his signature date and time across the seal, chain of custody, legal admissibility, the language of courtrooms and criminal proceedings. Preliminary results will take 5 to 7 days, he said, drawing my blood with practiced efficiency. Full toxicology report takes 3 to 4 weeks, but if there's something acutely dangerous, they'll flag it immediately. What about the blood panel? I asked. I'll have basic results by end of day. If your neurological markers are concerning, we'll know. At 10:30, I sat in Willard Travers' 18th floor downtown office overlooking Puget Sound's gray water. My attorney of 25 years at 62, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, listened without interrupting as I told him everything. The airport, Yates, Cedric, the supplements, Everett's phone call that morning. When I finished, Willard was quiet for a long moment. How many people had been watching over me while I walked around blind, trusting, grateful for poison pills? Then he opened his desk drawer and pulled out a manila envelope. 3 weeks ago, he said, sliding it across the oak desk, Vivian came to this office. She wanted me to draft a new will for you. Said you'd agreed to it, but wanted it kept secret from Everett because of family tensions. I stared at the envelope. She offered me $10,000 as a deposit. Said she'd bring the rest once the document was ready. The new will would declare you mentally incompetent and give her power of attorney over all your affairs. My hands were shaking again. I told her I needed a week to prepare the documents. Then I called Cedric Bailey that same afternoon. Willard's expression was grim. He and I have been coordinating your protection for 3 weeks while we gathered evidence. You've known for 3 weeks. My voice sounded hollow. We needed proof. Suspicion isn't enough. Cedric's surveillance, Yates' arrest, the supplements, this bribery attempt, it's building a case that will hold up in court. What did you do with her money? It's in my client trust account, documented, dated, witnessed by my paralegal. Evidence of conspiracy to commit fraud and elder abuse. He tapped the envelope. Everything she said to me is in my notes, everything admissible. I thought about Cedric in that dark car saving my life. Dr. Merrick handling poison with gloved hands. Willard turning away $10,000 to protect me. an entire conspiracy working in the shadows while I walked around trusting my family. Willard looked at me across that oak desk. What do you want me to do next? I thought about Vivian's bribery money sitting in a trust account, about Everett's voice saying, "Coming home right away," about 6 weeks of supplements I'd swallowed with gratitude, about Susan's photo on the mantle and the life we'd built that someone was trying to steal. I made a decision that would change everything. I want to know exactly how much I'm worth, I said quietly. Every asset, every account, every property, and then I want you to help me make them come for it one more time. Willard began the asset inventory that afternoon, Hart Logistics valuation, real estate holdings investment accounts. The numbers would take days to compile. Meanwhile, I waited for the phone to ring. It came at 2 p.m. the next day, Wednesday afternoon. Dr. Merrick's name on the screen, and I knew before answering that nothing would ever be the same. Mr. Hart. His voice was more cautious than usual. The expedited results came back from NMS Labs. I need to discuss them with you. I closed the door to my home office, sat at the desk, where Susan's photo watched me with frozen concern. Tell me. The first bottle memory support formula tested positive for scopolamine, microdoses carefully measured designed to accumulate over time. My hand tightened on the phone. What does that do to someone? Typically, it's used for motion sickness, but in sustained doses over 6 weeks, he paused. Severe memory impairment, confusion, and something more dangerous, extreme suggestibility. You'd be in a fog, docile. You'd sign documents put in front of you without really understanding what they said. The room tilted slightly. They didn't just try to kill me. They tried to make me compliant first, confused enough to sign whatever Vivian wanted, the new will declaring me incompetent, power of attorney, transfer documents for the company. 6 weeks of breakfast pills while my brain slowly dissolved into fog. How bad is it? I asked. The damage. Your preliminary blood work shows some neurological markers that concern me, but you stopped taking it in time. You'll recover fully. But, Mr. Hart, his tone shifted. I have a legal obligation under mandatory reporting laws. Intentional poisoning is a felony. I need to notify Seattle PD, Detective Shelby Hewitt. I said, pulling out the card she'd given me at the airport. Financial Crimes Division. I read him the number. I'll call her today, and Mr. Hart. The other 3 bottles are still being tested. Full toxicology takes longer. I'll contact you when results arrive. After he hung up, I sat alone in that home office staring at Susan's photo. I looked at Susan's photo on my desk and thought they didn't just try to kill me. They tried to make me sign away everything we built while my brain was compromised. Every contract I'd reviewed in the past 6 weeks, every business decision, every signature, all of it done while chemically impaired. Thursday morning at 8:30, I heard the kitchen door open, Vivian's voice calling out cheerfully. Dad, are you up? I brought you something special. I came downstairs in my robe, arranging my face into the vague, pleasant expression of a man who suspected nothing. Vivian stood at my kitchen counter holding a new supplement bottle. Sleek dark hair pulled back elegantly, expensive yoga clothes, practiced sweet smile that had once fooled me completely. She looked every bit the caring daughter-in-law visiting her aging father-in-law. I found this at a specialty pharmacy, she said, setting the bottle on the counter between us. Premium Cardio Support, a Singapore doctor, just published research on it. They only had 3 boxes left. I got the last one for you. I picked up the bottle with steady hands, though, my heart hammered against my ribs. Professional label. Convincing claims. $75 printed on the pharmacy sticker. That's very thoughtful, I said warmly. Thank you, sweetheart. Everett appeared behind her hair, uncombed exhaustion, evident in every line of his face. He said nothing. Didn't meet my eyes. Let me make us breakfast, I offered. I've got eggs, good coffee. We sat at the kitchen table in morning sunlight, streaming through windows that had once lit breakfasts with Susan. I scrambled eggs, poured coffee, made cheerful small talk about weather and neighborhood gossip. Vivian watched me carefully, assessing, looking for signs of confusion memory, lapses the fog she expected to see. You know, Dad, she said, stirring cream into her coffee with delicate precision. Everett and I were talking about your retirement plans. Have you thought about how you'll transition out of the company? How Everett will take over running everything? I smiled vaguely. Oh, plenty of time for that. Lots to consider. Of course. Her voice was honey. We just want to make sure you're comfortable, that everything's taken care of, your legacy protected. How do you eat breakfast with someone who's been poisoning you, smile and pass the eggs and act like everything is fine? I told stories from my youth, meandering, cheerful, the kind of thing a slightly confused older man might share, laughed at appropriate moments, asked Vivian about her yoga classes, let sentences trail off as if I'd forgotten where they were going. The perfect performance. Everett ate almost nothing. His hands fidgeted with his napkin. When Vivian turned to refill her coffee, he glanced at me with an expression I couldn't read. Guilt, fear something complex and tortured, then looked away quickly. They left at 9:30. I stood at the window watching their car pull away, maintaining the pleasant wave until they turned the corner. Then I moved. I labeled the bottle with a permanent marker, vial number 5, brought by Vivian Hart, July 14th, 2024, 8:30 a.m. Photographed it from 3 angles. Texted the images to Cedric and Dr. Merrick with 3 words, delivered personally today. Cedric's response came immediately. Bagging for evidence pickup. Good work. Dr. Merrick replied, we'll add to testing queue. I placed the bottle in a sealed Ziploc bag and set it in the locked drawer where I'd been keeping documentation. 5 bottles now. 5 different formulas each brought to me with concern and care. My phone buzzed in my hand, Dr. Merrick again. Mr. Hart, he said without preamble. Results for bottles 2 and 3 just came in. I need you to come to my office immediately. Don't discuss this over the phone. His voice had changed, no longer cautious, but urgent, almost frightened. What did you find? I asked. Not over the phone. Can you be here in 30 minutes? I'm on my way. I grabbed my keys with hands that had started shaking again. Scopolamine was bad enough chemical manipulation, induced docility, stolen agency. But Dr. Merrick's tone suggested something far worse. Thursday afternoon, Dr. Merrick's words left me shaking. By Friday morning, I'd learned that my son's debt was as fake as his concern, and that the woman who married him had been planning this for years. By Friday morning, I'd learned that my son's debt was as fake as his concern, and that the woman who married him had been planning this for years. Willard's office at 9, a.m. gray Seattle, morning rain, streaking the 18th floor windows. Cedric sat in the leather chair beside me, while Willard spread documents across his oak desk like evidence at a crime scene. The gambling debt. Willard began tapping a stack of papers. $350,000 supposedly owed to Cascade Financial Recovery, LLC. I'd seen those documents before. Everett had shown them to me 6 months ago, hands shaking, voice breaking, as he explained he was in trouble with dangerous people. I ran every database available. Willard continued. State registries, federal EIN lookups, Nevada corporate filings. Cascade Financial Recovery doesn't exist. Never has. The words didn't register at first. This address, he pointed to a line on the document. Virtual office space in Henderson, Nevada. The lease expired in 2022. The phone number goes to a disconnected line. The LLC registration number, pure fiction. Cedric leaned forward. Someone created these documents from scratch. Professional forgery, correct legal format, convincing letterhead, official-looking seals. But every single detail is fabricated. I stared at the papers that had haunted my son for months. There's no debt. None, Willard confirmed. Whoever made these understood business law and financial documentation. They knew exactly how to make fake debt look real. Vivian, I said. Cedric nodded. Vivian Shaw before she married Everett. I pulled her employment history. She worked as a paralegal at Henderson & Associates in Bellevue from 2016 to 2020. Small firm estate planning and contract law. 4 years learning document formats, legal language, how to make papers look authentic. 4 years. Long enough to master the forgery. Long enough to plan this meticulously. Everett believes it's real, I asked. Willard's expression was grim. That's the genius of it. He's not lying to you. He genuinely thinks he owes this money. She's had him living in terror of collectors who don't exist, threats that were never made. Pure psychological warfare. I thought about Everett lying awake at night, terrified of debt collectors who never existed, and realized Vivian had been torturing him for years. My son wasn't the villain I'd imagined. He was another victim, trapped, manipulated, driven to terrible things by manufactured fear. The timeline matters, Cedric added. She showed him these documents 8 months ago, right after your company's annual report went public, showing record profits. The moment she confirmed you had real money, she created fake debt to control him. Willard gathered the forgery evidence into a folder. This changes the criminal case significantly. Everett may have been operating under duress blackmail essentially. That's a mitigating factor. But he still paid an assassin, I said quietly. He did. That doesn't disappear, but context matters in sentencing. We broke for lunch. I couldn't eat. Just sat in a small cafe down the block, drinking coffee and watching rain fall on office workers hurrying past with umbrellas. At 2 o'clock back in Willard's office, he placed 2 documents side by side on his desk. This one, he tapped the left document, is the will Vivian thinks you'll sign. Everything transfers to Everett upon your legal incompetency declaration. Exactly what she asked me to draft. I looked at my name typed at the bottom signature line, waiting. This one, he tapped the right document, is your actual will. Notarized independently this morning at Morrison and Cross downtown. Nobody but me, you, and Cedric knows it exists. I read the key provision, if Jerry Hart dies under suspicious circumstances, or is declared legally incompetent before his 65th birthday, 100% of Hart Logistics assets, all properties and all financial accounts transfer immediately to Seattle Children's Hospital Foundation. How do you protect your assets from your own child while still hoping somewhere deep down that he can be saved? Everett gets nothing, I asked. Nothing, Willard confirmed. If you die suspiciously, or if anyone tries to declare you incompetent in the next 5 years, the hospital gets everything. The motive disappears instantly. Where are the copies? 3 locations, my personal safety deposit box at First Sound Bank. The independent notary office downtown, they keep original wills in a fireproof vault, and Cedric's evidence storage facility. Cedric added, even if something happens to 1 or 2 copies, the third survives, legally unbreakable. And the fake will, I asked. You'll sign it, Willard said. Give it to Vivian. Let her think her plan is working. But the moment she tries to use it, the moment she attempts to have you declared incompetent, or if anything happens to you, the fake will becomes Exhibit A in conspiracy charges. Proof of intent. The trap was elegant. Vivian thought she was manipulating me into signing my assets away. But the real will made murder, or incompetency declaration, instantly transfer everything to charity, eliminating all motive. And the fake will she wanted became evidence of the crime itself. I picked up the pen, signed the real will first with steady hands while Willard's paralegal witnessed, then signed the fake will that would become evidence. Outside, Seattle's gray water stretched toward distant islands, barely visible through rain. Somewhere out there, my son believed he owed money to phantom criminals. Somewhere his wife planned my death down to the last detail. Gerald, I said, then caught myself. Willard, if everything goes according to plan, what happens to Everett? Willard set down his pen and looked at me for a long moment. That depends on a decision we don't have to make today, he said carefully, on whether you want mercy or justice and whether Everett chooses to cooperate when the time comes. I thought about the fake debt that had terrorized my son for months. The poison pills I'd swallowed trusting his concern, the assassin with a knife waiting in the dark. What's the difference, I asked, between mercy and justice? Prison time, Willard said quietly. Full prosecution versus reduced sentencing for cooperation. Years behind bars versus the possibility of rebuilding his life afterward. But that choice comes later, after we have all the evidence we need. The question of mercy versus justice stayed with me through the afternoon. By 4 o'clock, I was sitting in Detective Shelby Hewitt's office at Seattle PD, learning how the law would answer it for me. Her office was smaller than I expected, walls covered with case files and whiteboards tracking financial crimes across the city. Cedric sat beside me, while Hewitt pulled up documents on her computer. Zane Yates took the proffer, she said, without preamble. Full cooperation agreement in exchange for consideration on federal charges weapon in airport restricted area, attempted assault. He disclosed everything how Everett hired him, the payment method, their communication timeline, the plan. That's enough for arrests, I asked. It's enough for something better. She turned her screen toward us. Washington State is a two-party consent jurisdiction under RCW 9.73.030. You can't record someone without their knowledge, but there's an exception. She pulled up a statute on her screen. RCW 9.73.230 permits law enforcement to seek warrants for electronic surveillance when probable cause exists. Yates' proffer gives us that probable cause. Combined with Cedric's 3 months of PI surveillance, the forensic results on Bottle 1, and Dr. Merrick's mandatory report of intentional poisoning, we have a strong case. A warrant to do what I asked. To install a recording device in your home. Kitchen specifically, where most conversations happen. The device records everything said in that room for 10 days. I install it personally tomorrow morning while you're out. Not Cedric P. I investigators lack legal authority for this. Cedric nodded. I document what I see. Detective Hewitt documents what they say. Everything they discuss in my kitchen will be recorded, I said slowly. Everything. And because it's court authorized under warrant, every word is admissible evidence. No defense attorney can challenge it. Hewitt clicked through documents. The judge is reviewing my application right now. I expect approval by tonight. Will I know what they're saying? Real-time access, she confirmed. Secure app on your phone. You can monitor your own home legally because you're the resident and the victim. You'll hear conversations as they happen or review recordings later. Full chain of custody, full legal protection. I thought about how I'd been living in that house, believing it was my sanctuary, never knowing it would become the place where every word was evidence. Ort, 10 days, Hewitt said. That's standard for this type of warrant. Enough time to capture conspiracy conversations, plans, admissions. If we need more, we petition for extension. What are you hoping to hear? I asked. Them discussing the next steps, how they'll get your signature on documents, what happens after, whether Everett is truly coerced or actively participating. Her expression softened slightly. And whether there's grounds for the mercy your attorney mentioned. The device was installed Saturday morning. I drove to Pike Place Market, walked around for 2 hours, not seeing anything, then sat in my car in the QFC parking lot on Queen Anne Avenue as evening fell. At 8 p.m., I put in the Bluetooth earpiece and opened the secure app on my phone. The interface was simple, a green light indicating active recording, a play button for live feed, a library of saved recordings. I pressed play. Static for a moment, then voices. Clear close, as if I were sitting in my own kitchen. Vivienne, Willard says the new will is almost done. When we get his signature, we activate phase 2. Everett's voice quieter, uncertain. What's phase 2? Which is more evil, killing someone quickly or declaring them incompetent and making them watch while you steal their life. We report your father to King County Superior Court as legally incompetent. Vivian said, her tone matter of fact, like she was discussing grocery shopping. We have medical records from the supplements showing cognitive decline. Willard certifies that your father signed the will but displayed clear signs of impairment. We petition for guardianship. Silence on the recording. Then, Everett guardianship. A judge appoints someone to make decisions for him, handle his finances, his medical care, his legal affairs. The guardian is me, obviously. I'm family, I'm his daughter-in-law, I've been caring for him. A pause. Once I'm appointed guardian, I control everything. The company, the properties, the accounts, all of it. While he's still, Everett's voice caught. While he's still alive. Of course, that's the point. She sounded almost amused. Much cleaner this way. No investigations, no suspicious deaths, no police involvement. Just a sad story about an aging man whose mind isn't what it used to be. His loving family steps in to help. Very common. Happens all the time. Longer silence. I sat motionless in my car, rain starting to tap against the windshield, listening to my daughter-in-law explain how she would legally erase me. We don't need... Everett started, then stopped. We don't need anything else. Anything else? He couldn't say the word. Murder, the knife at the airport, the poison in bottles 2 and 3 that I still didn't know the full details of. Nothing else? Vivian said firmly. That's the beauty of it. Just one signature on Willard's will. One competency hearing with the medical evidence we've already created. One judge's order. Then I have legal authority over every asset he owns. And Dad just... what lives in the house while you control everything. If he's cooperative, if not, there are excellent memory care facilities that accept guardianship placements. Either way, he's no longer a problem. The recording continued, sounds of dishes, water running, footsteps. They had moved on to discussing dinner plans like they hadn't just plotted to destroy someone's legal personhood. I turned off the app and sat in the dark QFC parking lot rain, now falling steadily. She didn't need me dead. She just needed me declared not myself anymore. Not competent, not capable, not a person with rights. Guardianship, legal erasure, sophisticated clean, almost impossible to fight once a judge signed the order. I picked up my phone with shaking hands and dialed Willard's cell. He answered on the second ring. "Jerry, they don't want me dead," I said. "They want me erased. Guardianship. Vivian is guardian." I just heard the whole thing on the warrant recording. Silence on his end, then a long exhale. That's actually more concerning than murder. Harder to prove, harder to stop. And if they succeed, I'm alive, but everything I built belongs to her, legally. Willard promised to research counter-strategies for the guardianship scheme. I went home to wait. Sunday afternoon passed slowly. Everett was home all day, so I had no chance to see anyone or leave without explanation. I moved through the house like a ghost, aware that recording devices captured every sound in my kitchen, that my son was upstairs living in, terror of debt that didn't exist. At 2 p.m., my phone vibrated. Dr. Merrick. I locked myself in the home office. "Mr. Hart." His tone was more cautious than previous calls. "The results for bottles 2 and 3 came back. I need to read these carefully." I sat at my desk, Susan's photo, watching from the frame where it had sat for 8 years. A vial 2, cognitive clarity. He paused. Benzodiazepine, low doses carefully measured. In someone already taking scopolamine from vial 1, the combination is devastating. It doesn't just cause confusion, it eliminates judgment entirely. You'd sign anything put in front of you without comprehension. Legal documents, financial transfers, anything. My hand tightened on the phone. Vial 3, senior brain health. Another pause, longer this time. Digoxin. It's a heart medication for people with specific cardiac conditions. But in someone who doesn't need it, someone with a healthy heart, accumulated doses over time cause severe arrhythmia. Eventually, fatal arrhythmia. Fatal, I repeated. Death that appears entirely natural, Dr. Merrick said quietly. A 60-year-old man has a heart attack. No one questions it. No one runs specific toxicology screens unless there's reason to suspect poisoning. This would look like natural causes. 3 bottles, 3 stages, confusion, then compliance, then death, all designed, so no one would ever know I'd been murdered. Mr. Hart, this is premeditated murder, the doctor continued. A 3-stage plan, Vial 1 to cause confusion and create medical documentation of cognitive decline. Vial 2 to ensure you'd sign legal documents without understanding. Vial 3 to kill you slowly, cleanly, in a way that wouldn't raise any red flags. I stared at Susan's photograph. She'd been gone 8 years. I'd spent those years alone building a company, raising a son, who'd apparently been planning to kill me with pharmaceutical precision. What about Vial 4? I asked. The one Vivian brought Thursday. I'd like to discuss that in person, Dr. Merrick said. Can you meet me at 4:30? There's a small cafe on Capitol Hill corner of 10th and Pike. Quiet on Sunday afternoons. The cafe was nearly empty when I arrived. Dr. Merrick sat at a back corner table, warm yellow lighting, making the space feel like a different world from the conspiracy I'd been living in. He slid a report across the table as I sat down. Vial 4 Premium Omega Complex. Completely clean, just fish oil. High quality, actually. No contaminants, no added substances. Exactly what the label claims. And I stared at the report. Look at this. He placed a receipt beside it. Walgreens on East Lake Avenue, 3 weeks ago. That's Everett's credit card. And according to the timestamp and store security footage Cedric obtained, Everett was alone. Vivian wasn't with him. He bought clean supplements, I whispered, without telling her. In his own way, yes, he was protecting you. Dr. Merrick's expression was complicated, part sympathy, part professional detachment. That doesn't excuse what he did with the assassin with the other bottles, but it suggests conflict. He's not wholly complicit. I thought about Everett's tortured expression at breakfast, the way he wouldn't meet my eyes, living in hell of his own making while trying to secretly save me. March 14th, 3 days before Susan died, in that car accident that was never quite explained. There's something else, Dr. Merrick said. He pulled another document from his folder. Cedric asked me to give this to you directly. He's had an independent investigator looking into financial records independent to avoid conflict of interest, since Cedric was involved in the current case. He placed the paper on the table between us. A bank statement. 8 years old. An account in the name Vivian Shaw, her maiden name before she married Everett. One transaction highlighted payment to Frank's Automotive Services, Tacoma, Washington. Amount $4,200. Date March 14, 2016. 3 days before Susan died. 3 days before the car accident on I-5 that the police had called unfortunate but not suspicious. Brake failure, they had said. She'd been driving fast, lost control, hit the median barrier at 70 miles per hour. These things happen to older vehicles. Susan's car had been 10 years old. Nothing fancy, nothing that would have had regular professional maintenance. March 14th. I said, my voice sounding strange and distant. 3 days before your wife's death, Dr. Merrick confirmed. Cedric noticed it during the financial investigation. The payment originated from an account Vivian had before she even met Everett. They didn't start dating until 2017, a year after your wife passed. A year after. Vivian had shown up in Everett's life 1 year after Susan died, after she'd cleared the path. What does this garage do? I asked. Dr. Merrick shook his head slowly. I don't know. Cedric asked the independent investigator to look into Frank's Automotive Services specifically. Find out what kind of work they do, whether they have any history of questionable repairs, anything suspicious. And the full results aren't in yet. The investigator is being thorough, pulling business licenses, talking to former employees, checking court records for any civil complaints. That takes time. I looked at the payment record. Vivian Shaw, $4,200, March 14, 2016. Susan died March 17th. For 8 years, I'd believed my wife's death was a tragic accident, random mechanical failure, bad luck on a rainy highway. But what if it wasn't random? What if Vivian had been planning this for 8 years? What if she'd killed my wife to clear the path to my son, to infiltrate my family, to position herself to take everything? How long? I whispered. How long has she been planning this? Dr. Merrick reached across the table and gripped my shoulder. We don't know yet, but when Cedric's investigator finishes the report on that garage, we'll know more. I looked at the date again. March 14th. The number burned into my vision. When those results came in, I would know if Vivian had killed before. The investigator's report on the Tacoma garage would take days. I couldn't wait. I had to move forward. Monday morning, I sat in my kitchen with cold coffee and a Bluetooth earpiece, listening to my son make the phone call that would seal his fate. 10:15. Through the small device in my ear, I heard movement upstairs, footsteps across Everett's bedroom, the sound of his phone dialing. 3 rings, then Willard's professional voice, Travers and Associates Willard speaking. Mr. Travers, it's Everett Hart. My son's voice was tight with tension. I'm calling to confirm the new will is finalized. We just need my dad's signature. Yes, Mr. Hart. Willard's tone was perfectly professional, the careful detachment of an attorney discussing routine estate planning. The will has been drafted per your request, all provisions as specified. We just need your father's signature to complete the process. I can arrange a signing session this week if that works for his schedule. That's thank you. Thank you, Mr. Travers. Relief flooded Everett's voice. I appreciate your help with this. Of course, I'll be in touch to schedule. The call ended. I heard Everett exhale heavily upstairs, footsteps moving away from his bedroom. My phone vibrated in my hand. Text from Willard recorded. Clean audio. Rosa got it. All good. I typed back with steady fingers. Good. Another text from Cedric this time. Heard it on the wire. Perfect. I looked at my phone. Willard's text. Hewitt's system. Access Cedric's surveillance log. And realized I'd built a network as sophisticated as Vivian's, except mine was legal. Willard, the double agent, playing his role perfectly, telling Everett one thing, while coordinating with me and Detective Hewitt, his paralegal Rosa documenting every call, every conversation, building the legal record that would stand up in court. Cedric watching from the shadows with 3 months of surveillance evidence. Hewitt with her warrant-authorized wiretaps, recording devices, forensic toxicology reports. Dr. Merrick with medical documentation of intentional poisoning. All of us operating in the dark with precision, while Everett and Vivian thought they were winning. At 2 o'clock, I met Cedric and Detective Hewitt at the old Sodo warehouse. Hart Logistics cold storage facility closed for 2 years since we'd moved operations to a newer building in Kent. Gray concrete walls rose 3 stories high, yellow industrial lights casting harsh shadows across empty space that had once held millions of dollars in frozen goods. The smell of cold metal lingered, even though the refrigeration had been off for years. Distant sounds of trucks from working warehouses nearby echoed through the cavernous interior. "This is it," I said, my voice carrying in the empty space. "Where we set the final trap." Cedric walked the perimeter checking sightlines. 6 cameras, 1 at each entrance, 1 on the safe, 1 wide angle for the main floor. Everything wireless encrypted, feeding directly to Detective Hewitt's secure server. Hewitt pulled out her tablet, showing me the live camera feeds. "The moment anyone enters this building, we have them on video. Time-stamped, location tagged, admissible in court." "Aisha in the safe?" I asked. Cedric led me to the far wall, where an industrial safe sat, the kind used for storing high-value inventory documents. He opened it, showing me the contents. No gold, no cash, just manila folders stacked carefully, each labeled and dated. Forensic toxicology reports from NMS Labs. Wiretap transcripts from Detective Hewitt's warrant. Cedric's 3 months of surveillance photographs. The fake debt documents with their Nevada virtual office address. The payment record to the Tacoma garage dated 3 days before Susan died. Every piece of evidence that would prove conspiracy to commit murder, elder abuse, fraud, extortion. "This is what they'll find if they manage to open it," Cedric said. "Their own crimes documented and waiting." The warehouse where I'd stored frozen goods for 20 years would become the place where Vivian's schemes were put on ice forever. "The plan," I said, turning to face both of them, "is to make sure Vivian hears about assets she can't resist. Physical gold and cash I supposedly accumulated in the 90s, kept off the books, not in any bank records. Hidden here in this warehouse safe." Hewitt nodded. "When she realizes the will route is blocked, when she understands you're not going to sign Willard's fake will, she'll need another option, gold and cash that aren't documented anywhere. That's exactly what she needs." "How do we make sure she hears?" Cedric asked. "Controlled channels," I said. "A conversation she'll overhear on the wiretap, a comment I'll make at dinner, maybe a private phone call I'll have with Willard while Everett is nearby. We'll plant it carefully, make it feel authentic." "And when she comes," Hewitt asked, "we'll be ready." I gestured to the cameras, the empty warehouse, the safe full of evidence. "Search and arrest warrant ready to execute upon one criminal act at this location. Breaking and entering, attempted theft, attempted extortion. Any of those sufficient?" "More than sufficient," Hewitt confirmed. "Judge has already reviewed the application. The warrant's signed and ready. One criminal act here, and we move." I looked around the warehouse that represented 20 years of my life, built from nothing, grown into something that mattered now, serving as the final stage for a trap I never imagined I'd have to set. Detective Hewitt looked at me in that cold warehouse, 20 years of memories in those concrete walls. "One more thing," she said. "Who will tell Vivian about the gold safe? It has to be believable, natural. If she suspects a trap, she won't come." I looked around at the cameras positioned in shadows, the safe full of evidence, the empty space that would soon hold the final confrontation. I thought about dinner tables and performances and one final act. "I will," I said. "At dinner, I'll invite them both for a special family meal, to discuss the future, I'll say. And during that dinner, I'll make sure Vivian learns exactly what she needs to hear." The dinner would be tonight. I'd set the stage, plant the bait, and watch everything unfold. Tuesday morning, I made the phone call that would bring my son to his last supper, and my voice didn't shake once. "Everett," I said, when he answered, keeping my tone warm and casual. "I want to make a special dinner tonight, just the 3 of us, you, Vivian, and me. I'm cooking steak your favorite since you were a kid. And I want to talk about the future, about the company, about everything." Silence on the other end. I could hear him breathing, thinking, probably wondering what this meant. "That sounds nice, Dad." His voice was uncertain. "What time?" 7 o'clock. I'll have everything ready." "Okay, we'll be there." After hanging up, I stood in my kitchen for a long moment, looking at the phone in my hand. The invitation had been genuine, warm, loving, the kind a father gives a son he cares about. Despite everything I knew, despite the poison and the assassin and the fake debt, some part of me still hoped. At 9:30, I drove to the QFC on Queen Anne Avenue. Tuesday morning, half-empty soft music, playing over speakers, fluorescent lights, making everything too bright. I pushed my cart through produce first. Fresh vegetables, asparagus, cherry tomatoes, mixed greens for salad. Everything Susan would have chosen. She'd had opinions about vegetables, about ripeness and quality, and which farms treated their workers fairly. The meat counter stopped me cold. Ribeye steaks behind glass, marbled and thick, the good cuts that cost too much but tasted like celebration. Susan always chose the meat because I never picked the right ones. Too lean or too fatty, wrong thickness, wrong grade. I stood there staring at the steaks, and my eyes started to well up before I even realized what was happening. "Are you okay, dear?" An elderly woman in her 70s with a kind, weathered face stood beside me at the meat counter, someone who understood the particular loneliness of shopping alone after decades with a partner. Her cart held single-serving frozen meals and one small chicken breast. "Yes," I managed, smiling through whatever threatened to spill over. "Just miss my wife a little. She always knew which cut to pick." The woman patted my arm with soft, papery fingers. "I understand completely. 42 years with my Henry. Shopping never got easier after he passed. I still find myself turning to ask his opinion about things." We stood there for a moment, two people who'd lost their partners, surrounded by meat and strangers, and Tuesday morning routines that felt both normal and impossibly difficult. "It's the thick ones," she said, gently pointing. "For special dinners, always get the thick ones. That's what Henry used to say." I nodded, unable to speak. She would have known exactly which cut to choose, she always did, for every decision, large and small. I never appreciated that enough while she was here. I chose 3 ribeyes thick ones and thanked Margaret Sutton for her kindness. She squeezed my hand once before moving on to examine chicken thighs with the careful attention of someone shopping on a fixed income. Potatoes for mashing, good wine, a Cabernet from a winery. Susan and I had visited 20 years ago. Buttercream, fresh herbs, all the ingredients for a meal she would have made for a dinner she would have hosted with grace and warmth. At the checkout, the young cashier couldn't have been more than 20 rang up each item with bored efficiency, probably thinking about her phone or her break or anything, except the 60-year-old man buying dinner for a family that was about to cease to exist. I drove home, slowly, groceries in the back seat, thinking about Susan cooking thousands of meals in that kitchen. Everett doing homework at the table every night, through elementary school, middle school, high school. The 3 of us eating together before she died, talking about his day, about my work, about plans for summer vacation. If you're a parent, you know this truth. There are meals you cook with joy and meals you cook with grief. This was both. Back home, I carried the grocery bags inside and set them on the kitchen counter. The same counter where Susan had chopped vegetables for 30 years, where Everett had eaten cereal before school every morning, where Vivienne had placed that 5th bottle of supplements just days ago, smiling her practiced sweet smile. I unpacked slowly, steaks in the refrigerator, wine on the counter to breathe before dinner, potatoes in the basket where Susan always kept them. The kitchen looked the same as it had for years, blue tile, backsplash, white cabinets, window over the sink, facing the small backyard garden Susan had planted, and that I'd maintained poorly since her death. Everything familiar, everything about to change. I put my hands on the counter and looked around at the room where we'd lived as a family, where Susan had made birthday cakes and Christmas cookies and Tuesday night dinners, where Everett had announced he'd gotten into college, where he'd brought Vivienne to meet me for the first time, where I'd sat alone for 8 years after Susan died. This room had held our whole life. Tonight it would hold the end of it. The realization hit me fully. For the first time, this truly was the last family dinner. After tonight, Everett would be arrested. Vivienne would be exposed. The legal system would take over, and whatever remained of my relationship with my son would be filtered through lawyers and courtrooms and prison visits. The Hart family, what was left of it, would cease to exist as it was. I stood alone in that kitchen afternoon light, streaming through the window, and whispered to the empty house. This is the last dinner. After tonight, nothing will ever be the same. The words hung in the air. Susan's photo on the mantel in the living room watched through the doorway. The clock on the wall ticked towards 7 p.m. In 8 hours, they would arrive. I would cook the perfect meal. I would perform the perfect oblivious father. I would plant the information about the warehouse gold, and the trap would be set for the final act. 8 hours passed in preparation. I cooked, I set the table. I made everything perfect. At 7 p.m. Tuesday evening, the doorbell rang and I opened the door to welcome my son and the woman who'd been trying to kill me for 6 weeks. The dining room looked like something from a magazine spread. White tablecloth pressed smooth without a wrinkle. 2 silver candles flickering in holders that had belonged to Susan's grandmother. 3 wine glasses catching the light. The steaks I'd seared to perfection resting on warmed plates beside roasted vegetables and garlic mashed potatoes. Cabernet breathing on the sideboard, the good bottle from that winery Susan and I had visited. And in two corners barely visible in the shadows, small devices with tiny red lights blinking. Detective Hewitt had installed them that afternoon while Everett and Vivian were out, recording everything. Every word, every gesture, every reaction. Admissible evidence. Come in, come in. I greeted them with open arms and a smile that felt natural, because I'd practiced it in the mirror for an hour. So good to see you both. Vivienne, you look beautiful tonight. She did. Sleek navy blue dress hair elegantly pulled back, makeup flawless. She stepped into my home, scanning me subtly with those sharp eyes, looking for signs of the confusion the supplements should have caused by now. Checking for the fog, the docility, the vulnerability she'd been manufacturing for weeks. Dad, you really didn't have to go to all this trouble, she said, her practiced smile warm and perfect. But it smells wonderful. Everett followed behind her, holding a bouquet wrapped in paper. White roses, my breath caught. Susan's favorite. She'd had them in her hands on our wedding day, in vases throughout the house every anniversary. He set them on the side table, voice quiet. These reminded me of... He stopped. I thought you'd like them. I didn't know if he'd chosen them consciously or if it was coincidence. Either way, my heart clenched. They're perfect, I managed. Thank you, son. We sat. I poured wine with steady hands, playing the perfect host. Relaxed, friendly, disarming. To family, but I toasted, raising my glass. They echoed it. We drank. Conversation floated around safe topics. The unusual warmth for July. The company's quarterly reports, profits up 12%, Heart Logistics still thriving. A book Vivian was reading about some celebrity's memoir. I told cheerful stories from my youth. The time I'd crashed my father's car into a mailbox at 16. My first job at a warehouse making $3 an hour. How Susan and I had met at a library, both reaching for the same book on industrial logistics. I laughed at the right moments, asked questions, seemed genuinely delighted to have them there. The white roses Everett brought sat on the side table like ghosts, Susan's favorites, whether he remembered or not. Inside, my heart beat steadily, cold, controlled, like a machine counting down to detonation. Halfway through the meal, I set down my fork deliberately. I said, taking a slow sip of wine, I've been having the strangest dreams lately. Vivienne looked up from her steak. Very vivid ones. I continued swirling the wine in my glass. Almost real? I paused. Poured myself more Cabernet with a hand that didn't shake. In one of them, there was this wealthy old father in Seattle. Loved his son more than anything. The son was successful, smart, married to a beautiful woman. I smiled gently. But in the dream, the son and his wife were plotting to kill him. Silence descended like a curtain falling. They had this whole plan ready. I said, voice still light, conversational. Lure the father to the airport at night. Hired killer waiting with chloroform and a knife. Stage it like a robbery. Then the son collects the life insurance, $5 million, I think it was in the dream, and takes over the family company. Vivian's fork froze halfway to her mouth. But that wasn't enough. I continued cutting my steak with careful precision. They had supplements, 4 bottles. One had scopolamine to cause confusion. Another had benzodiazepine to increase suggestibility. The third had digoxin, that's a heart medication apparently, to cause a slow fatal heart failure that would look completely natural. Everett gulped water, coughing. His face had drained of all color. Have you ever told someone you know they tried to kill you but smiled while saying it, so they couldn't react without confessing? And then this was the clever part. I took another bite of steak, chewed thoughtfully. The wife had this backup plan, guardianship fraud. She'd convinced the son to report the father as legally incompetent. Medical records from the supplements showing cognitive decline. Lawyers certifying the father, signed documents but displayed clear impairment. Then a judge appoints a guardian to control everything. Vivian's knife clattered onto her plate. The sound echoed in the sudden silence. The guardian would be the wife, of course, I said. Family member, daughter-in-law, caring and concerned. She'd control all the father's assets. The company, the properties, the accounts, everything. While he was still alive, but completely erased as a legal person. Pretty sophisticated, don't you think? I smiled warmly at Everett across the candlelight. Thank God it was just a dream, right? I said. My Everett would never do such a thing. Would you, son? Everett opened his mouth. Nothing came out. The candles flickered. Wind rattled the windows. Somewhere in the darkness, those tiny red lights kept blinking, recording everything. The silence stretched on and on. Vivienne set down her fork with deliberate control, her practiced smile finally fully gone. What replaced it was something cold and flat, and calculating the real face I'd never seen before. "That's quite an extreme dream, Dad," she said, voice thin like a blade's edge. "You dream that much?" I looked straight at her across the candlelight, letting the silence stretch between us like a wire pulled taut ready to snap. Her question hung in the air like a challenge. "Do you dream that much?" I leaned back in my chair and smiled at Vivienne's cold question, then reached into my jacket and pulled out a white envelope. "No," I said calmly. "Usually I don't remember dreams at all. They fade by morning." I placed the envelope deliberately on the table between us, next to the candles that had burned halfway down. But this one was so real, I remember every detail. Vivienne's eyes fixed on the envelope. "Earlier this week," I said, "I met with Willard Travers and changed my will." She stiffened almost imperceptibly. I continued, voice steady and conversational, like I was discussing weekend plans. "The new will has an interesting stipulation. If I die under suspicious circumstances, accident, unexpected illness, anything that seems even slightly unnatural, or if anyone attempts to have me declared legally incompetent under any circumstances before my 65th birthday, 100% of my assets transfer immediately to Seattle Children's Hospital Foundation." I paused to take a sip of wine. "Heart Logistics, the properties, this house, the vacation cabin, the commercial buildings downtown, all stocks, bonds, and financial accounts. $48 million net worth, give or take." I set down my glass. "To the hospital. You and Everett don't get a dime." The silence that followed had weight and texture. "It's notarized," I added. 3 copies sent to 3 independent locations. Completely irreversible. Everett opened his mouth. No sound came out. Vivienne stared at me across the candlelight, and I watched her practiced smile disappear entirely. Her expression shifted through shock, then rage, then calculation, all in the space of 2 seconds before locking into something cold and flat and utterly devoid of humanity. The mask was off. This was who she really was. I picked up my fork and continued eating my steak. Cut, chew, swallow. As if I'd just discussed the weather instead of destroying their entire scheme. They sat frozen, barely touching their food. The candles flickered. Wind rattled the windows. The white roses Everett had brought seemed to wilt in real time. I finished my steak while they sat frozen and realized this was the last meal we'd ever share as anything resembling a family. Finally, Vivienne stood. She placed her napkin on the table with controlled precision, every movement measured. "Thanks for dinner, Dad," she said. Her voice was thin, flat, not grateful, not warm, just empty, cold, done. Everett stood too, moving like a puppet with tangled strings. He looked at me. Once eyes full of something I couldn't read, didn't want to read, then followed Vivienne to the door. I didn't get up, just sat there at the head of the table with 2 barely touched plates across from me. The door closed. I looked into the corner where the tiny red light blinked in shadow and nodded slightly. Detective Hewitt would have everything on recording, every word, every reaction, every second of Vivienne's mask falling away. At 10:30, I was clearing the dinner table when my phone vibrated. Detective Hewitt. "They didn't waste time," she said without preamble. The warrant-authorized wiretap caught a call. Everett dialed Vivienne at 9:45 while driving home. "Want me to read the transcript, East?" "Please." I heard papers rustling. "Everett, we have a big problem. He knows everything. The will plan is completely done." She paused. Vivienne's response, "Calm down. There's another way." My hand tightened on the phone. Vivienne continues. Hewitt read voice professional, but with an edge of something darker. He mentioned the gold vault in that story about his father, the old warehouse. If we can't get his assets through paperwork, we take them directly. Then Everett says, "You mean," and trails off. Vivienne cuts him off. "You need 3 days to arrange it properly. Friday. We do this before he can take any further legal action." The call ended there, Hewitt explained. Clean recording, fully admissible. Friday, 3 days. That's all the time they thought they had left. "They're shifting strategies," Hewitt said. "From legal manipulation to violent direct extortion. I'm filing the search and arrest warrant for the warehouse first thing tomorrow morning. We have everything we need. Yates proffered the forensic evidence, 3 months of Cedric's surveillance, the wiretap recordings, tonight's dinner conversation. The judge will sign it." She paused. but I need your explicit authorization to proceed. This moves us from investigation to active operation. Once that warrant is signed, we're committed. Are you certain? I walked into the living room, dark except for the distant glow of streetlights through the window. Seattle night outside, cold and wet, the city sleeping while my family plotted violent robbery. Susan's photo sat on the mantel where it had for 8 years, smiling, frozen, gone. I thought about the warehouse with its cameras and empty safe, the trap set and waiting, Vivian's cold voice saying, "Take it directly," without hesitation or remorse. Everett going along with it because he believed he had no choice. 3 more days until they walked into evidence that would send them both to prison for years. "Proceed," I said quietly. "Do whatever needs to be done." "Understood. The warrant will be ready by tomorrow afternoon. When they make their move Friday, we'll be waiting." She hung up. I sat down on the couch in the darkness phone screen, fading to black, leaving me alone with Susan's photograph, and the sound of rain beginning to fall outside. The dinner plates still sat on the table in the next room. Evidence of the last meal, the final performance before everything came apart. I looked at Susan's photo, barely visible in the dim light. "Almost there," I whispered to her. 3 more days, then Everett and Vivian walk into the warehouse and it all ends. I closed my eyes, exhausted but certain. The trap was set, the cameras installed, the warrant being prepared, everything positioned perfectly. What I didn't know yet, what I couldn't have known, was that Vivian had one more move I hadn't anticipated. Something she'd been planning all along, separate from everything else. A backup plan for her backup plan. But I would find out soon enough. Whatever Vivian's backup plan was, I couldn't wait to find out. I had to move first. Wednesday morning, July 22nd. I sat alone in my study, preparing for the most dangerous phone call of my life. A yellow legal pad lay on the desk in front of me, covered with my handwritten script. Lines I'd rehearsed a dozen times, trying to find the exact tone, defeated, but not suspicious, cooperative, but not eager, vulnerable in a way that would make Everett believe he'd finally broken me. Acting vulnerable turned out to be harder than acting strong. I picked up the phone, set it down, picked it up again. My hand was trembling, not from fear, from the weight of what I was about to do, the final performance. The last time I would deliberately deceive my son before everything came crashing down around him. I dialed his number, 3 rings, then his voice cautious, "Dad." "Everett." I let exhaustion bleed into my tone. "I need to talk to you about something." "What's wrong?" "I've been thinking about Tuesday night, about what you and Vivian must think of me." I paused as if gathering courage. "I know I haven't been myself lately. The things I said, I've been paranoid, suspicious of everyone." Silence on his end, listening. "I want to fix things," I continued. "I'm moving some assets around, just to protect them, not from you, from Vivian, in case she tries something legal while we're sorting this out." "Protect them how?" His voice had shifted, interested now. "Physical assets, gold bars I've had in storage for years. I'm moving them to the Sodo warehouse. You remember the old Hart Logistics cold storage facility we closed 2 years ago?" "Yeah, I remember." "There's a vault there, industrial safe, very secure." I made my voice drop, conspiratorial, like I was sharing something I shouldn't. "I'm putting about $2.5 million in gold there, just temporarily until I figure out what to do long term." I heard him breathing. "The thing is," I said, letting worry creep in, "I'm terrible with security codes. Always have been. Your mother used to manage all that." A pause. "I keep using the same combinations because I can't remember new ones. Our anniversary backwards 713085. I know it's not smart, but..." "That's fine, Dad," Everett said quickly. Too quickly. "It's good you're being careful. The warehouse makes sense." "You think so?" "Absolutely. Very smart." We talked for another 5 minutes. I asked about his day, mentioned feeling tired, said I'd been sleeping better since getting things organized. Playing the role of a man who'd been worn down and was finally surrendering. When I hung up, I sat motionless for a long moment. The bait was dropped. Before I tell you what happened next with that phone call, let me ask comment A if you think setting this trap was the right thing to do, or B if there was a better way, and tell me in one sentence what you would have done differently. Please note some details ahead are adapted for storytelling to convey the emotional weight of these choices. An hour later, my phone rang. Detective Hewitt. "Your son moved fast," she said without preamble. "Surveillance picked up activity within 30 minutes of your call." "What kind of activity?" He made contact with 3 individuals, known associates with criminal records, burglary, assault, theft. We've been monitoring their communications per the warrant. My stomach tightened. He's hiring them, she continued. $8,000 each, $24,000 total. One of them is already cooperating with us, offered information in exchange for consideration on pending charges. I closed my eyes. What did the cooperating witness say? Break-in scheduled for Friday, July 24th at approximately 10 p.m. Your son gave them the warehouse address, the safe location, and the combination you provided. They're planning to take the gold and split it. Evidence: conspiracy to commit robbery, criminal intent documented and witnessed. The trap was working exactly as planned. There's one complication. Hewitt said, her tone shifting slightly. I taught Everett to look for weakness in business deals, to exploit vulnerability without mercy. Now I was using that same lesson against him, and the irony felt like swallowing glass. What complication? One of the 3 men has military background. Special Forces dishonorably discharged, but trained in tactical operations. Our cooperating witness says this guy seems unusually cautious, asking questions about why a wealthy man would store gold in an abandoned warehouse, questioning whether the whole setup feels too convenient. My hand tightened on the phone. He suspects something, I asked. Possibly, the cooperating witness isn't sure. But if this military-trained man decides the job smells like a setup, he might warn your son. And if your son gets spooked, the whole trap collapses, I finished. Exactly. We'd lose our chance to catch them in the act. The robbery conspiracy charge relies on them actually attempting the crime. If they back out, we only have wiretapped conversations, which a good defense attorney could argue away as theoretical talk. I looked out my study window at the gray Seattle afternoon. Rain starting to fall. 3 days until Friday. 3 days for that cautious military man to talk Everett out of the robbery. 3 days for everything to fall apart. What do we do? I asked. We wait, Hewitt said, and hope that $8,000 each is enough motivation to override his caution. Greed usually wins, but I wanted you aware of the risk. After she hung up, I sat in my study, watching rain streak down the window. The trap was set, the bait taken, the timeline established. But there was a wild card now. A trained, cautious man who might see through the elaborate fiction I'd constructed, who might warn Everett before Friday, who might cause my son to walk away from the warehouse, leaving me with nothing but wiretap recordings that proved intent, but not action. I thought about that military man, studying the details, sensing something wrong, pulling the thread that would unravel everything. Thursday passed in agonizing slowness, waiting to see if the military-trained man would expose everything. By nightfall, I still hadn't heard from Hewitt. No warning, no abort signal, which meant the trap was still on. I hadn't opened the album in 3 years, but that night I couldn't sleep. 10 p.m. sitting on my bed in the dark, I pulled the heavy photo album from the closet shelf. Blue leather cover, gold embossing that had worn smooth over decades. Susan had organized it meticulously, every photo labeled with dates and locations in her careful handwriting. I opened it slowly. Everett at 3 years old, standing in our backyard garden, wearing red rain boots too big for his feet, holding a toy shovel, grinning at the camera with 2 missing front teeth. Susan had planted tomatoes that year. He'd helped dig the holes. Everett at 8, standing on a kitchen stool beside Susan, both of them covered in flour. They'd been baking chocolate chip cookies for his school fundraiser. His expression so serious, concentrating on measuring ingredients, while Susan laughed at something off camera. College graduation, cap and gown, diploma in hand, that particular pride in his eyes that comes from earning something difficult. Susan and I flanking him, her hand on his shoulder, my arm around both of them. Then the photo that made me stop. Everett at 28, bringing Vivienne home for the first time. Standing in our living room, his arm around her waist, introducing her nervously. She wore a blue dress, hair pulled back elegantly, that practiced smile I now recognized. But her eyes weren't on the camera. I'd never noticed before. In 7 years of that photo sitting in this album, I'd looked at Everett's happy expression, at how young they both were at the beginning of what I'd thought was a love story. I'd never noticed that Vivienne's eyes were turned slightly away from the camera lens, looking past Everett, past me and Susan holding the camera, toward the windows that showed our view of Queen Anne Hill, the expensive neighborhood, the house that represented wealth. She wasn't looking at my son. She was sizing up the prize. I thought she was shy, I whispered to the empty bedroom. She was calculating. How many other signs had I missed? How many small moments where her mask had slipped, and I had been too trusting, too welcoming, too blind to see? I turned more pages, photos from their wedding, holidays, family dinners. In every single one, if I looked carefully, Vivian's attention was never quite where it should be. Never fully on Everett, always assessing, always watching, always planning. I closed the album. Tomorrow I would either save my son or bury him. Friday afternoon. At 3 o'clock I stood in the Sodo warehouse with Cedric and Detective Hewitt for the final check. 6 plainclothes officers, Hewitt said, walking me through the positions. 2 outside watching entrances, 4 inside positioned in the mezzanine storage areas with clear sightlines. The cameras go live at 2000 hours 8 p.m. Everything we discussed is ready. Cedric pointed to the safe against the far wall. Contains all the evidence documents, forensic reports, financial records, surveillance photos, plus the letter you wrote. The letter, I'd written it 2 nights ago, addressed to Everett, explaining that I knew everything that I'd set this trap, but that I still loved him. That if he cooperated fully with authorities, I would speak to the prosecutor on his behalf. An offer of mercy buried inside a spring-loaded trap. Or the cooperating witness. Hewitt continued, "We'll call the moment they attempt to open the safe. That's our trigger. Officers' move and arrests made everything documented." I looked around the warehouse. 20 years of my work life had happened in this building. Now, it would be the place where my son's criminal conspiracy ended. The trap was perfect, unless the military man talked. "Detective," I said, the question I'd been avoiding all day finally forcing itself out. "If Everett cooperates fully, testifies, provides everything, what kind of sentence are we talking about?" Hewitt exchanged a glance with Cedric. "Now, conspiracy to commit murder, elder abuse fraud, attempted robbery," she said. "Normal sentencing guidelines, 12 to 15 years. My chest tightened. "But with full cooperation," she continued. "Early guilty plea, material assistance to prosecution, genuine remorse, 3 to 4 years. Maybe parole consideration after 2. 3 to 4 years of my son's life. For trying to kill me. For being manipulated by a woman who'd been planning this since before she even married him." "Will you tell him that," I asked, "during the arrest? Will you make sure he knows cooperation is an option?" "Yes," Hewitt said quietly. "Standard procedure. We'll read rights make the arrest, then immediately offer the cooperation option. He'll have it explained clearly before he makes any statements." I nodded, not trusting my voice. "About your concern," Hewitt said. The military-trained man who seemed suspicious. My stomach dropped. Here it was, the exposure, the collapse. "He's one of ours," she said simply. "Undercover officer, former Army Ranger, now Seattle PD Special Operations. I planted him specifically to monitor the other 2 hired men and provide insider testimony. He's been feeding us real-time intelligence on their planning." The relief hit me like a physical wave. "His caution was intentional," she continued, "making sure the other 2 didn't get suspicious of why a job this easy was paying so well. He's been doing exactly what we needed, keeping them committed while documenting everything. The trap wasn't compromised. It was reinforced." I thanked them both and walked to my car in the fading afternoon light. Friday, July 21st. The robbery was scheduled for Monday the 24th, 3 more days of waiting. And I was 10 feet from my car when Hewitt's phone buzzed. She looked at the screen and her entire posture changed. "Mr. Hart," she called out, voice sharp and urgent. I turned back. She held up her phone, showing me a text message from a number I didn't recognize. "From our undercover officer," she said, already moving toward her vehicle. "Target just called, meeting for tonight instead of the 24th. Moving now. Repeat operation happening tonight." The timeline had collapsed. 3 days had become 3 hours. 3 hours. That's all the time we had. Hewitt made calls, officers scrambled into position, cameras activated early. By 6:30, everything was ready. At 7, I locked my front door for the last time and drove away. The house stood empty behind me. Over the previous 2 days, I had quietly arranged for a moving company to clear everything, furniture, photographs, dishes, books, every physical reminder that anyone had ever lived there. The moment Hewitt's emergency call came, I made the final call to confirm they could move tonight. The walls were bare, the rooms echoed. Only one thing remained, the laptop in my study positioned on the empty desk, camera facing the door. Cedric waited 3 blocks away in his car engine, off laptop open on the passenger seat, showing multiple camera feeds. I slid into the back seat without a word. All set, he asked quietly. As ready as we'll ever be. We waited. 7:15, 7:30. 8 o'clock came and went. My phone buzzed at 8:45. Text from the undercover officer. On the move, 4 vehicles, ETA 15 minutes. 4 vehicles, Everett, Vivienne, and the 3 hired men arriving separately to avoid attention. At 9 p.m. exactly, headlights swept across my street. Cedric's laptop showed the feed from the hidden exterior camera. A dark sedan pulled into my driveway. Everett got out, Vivienne beside him. 2 more cars parked on the street. 3 men emerged, shapes in the darkness. Faces I couldn't see clearly. They're inside, Cedric whispered, though no one could hear us. 4 shapes, flashlights. On the laptop screen, I watched beams of light sweep through my living room, through the dining room, where we'd had that final dinner, through the kitchen, where Susan had cooked thousands of meals. Everett's voice tinny through the laptop speakers. Why is everything gone? Confusion in his tone, fear starting to creep in. They moved from room to room. Empty bedroom, empty guest room. Flashlight beams crossing in the darkness, searching for furniture that wasn't there, belongings that had vanished. Wait for the study, I said to Cedric. 30 seconds. The flashlight beams converged on my study door. Everett pushed it open. The laptop on the desk activated automatically, screen glowing blue in the darkness. The scheduled video call connected exactly on time. And there I was, on their screen, looking back at them from Cedric's car 3 blocks away. This was the moment, 40 years of building gone in one revelation. Everett froze. Vivienne stepped beside him, her face illuminated by the laptop's glow. Hello, Everett, I said calmly through the video connection. Vivienne, gentlemen. I pointed to the corner of the study behind them, where a small red light blinked in the shadows. That's a camera, I said. One of several. Everything you've done since entering my home has been recorded and live-streamed to Detective Shelby Hewitt of the Seattle Police Department and Willard Travers, my attorney under warrant KC-2024-11-2847. Silence. Complete frozen silence. You've just committed criminal trespass under RCW 9, A.5, 2.070. I continued, keeping my voice steady and professional. Conspiracy to commit extortion, breaking and entering, all recorded, all admissible in court. One of the 3 men I couldn't see which started backing toward the door. The 3 men who were hired, I said, addressing them directly. I don't know your names. I don't care about your names. Walk away right now. Leave this house. Contact Detective Hewitt and cooperate fully. If you do that, you walk free. No charges, clean slate. This is your only chance. 2 of them bolted immediately, footsteps pounding through the empty house, front door slamming. The 3rd man, the undercover officer, though they didn't know it, hesitated for effect, then followed. Now it was just Everett and Vivienne standing in my empty study, staring at my face on that glowing screen. Everett, I said, and my voice finally cracked slightly. Son, I know about the fake debt. I know Vivienne forged those documents to control you. I know you believed you had no choice. His face on the screen, he looked like he might cry. There's still a way out, I continued. The Sodo warehouse, the safe you were planning to rob. It doesn't contain gold. It contains evidence. Every piece of documentation about what's been done to me, and a letter I wrote for you. Go there if you want, or don't. The choice is yours. Would mercy reach him now, or had I already lost him forever? But know this, I said. If you choose to cooperate with Detective Hewitt, if you testify honestly about everything Vivienne planned, if you show genuine remorse, there's a path to redemption. 3 to 4 years instead of 15. A chance to rebuild your life after. Everett opened his mouth. No sound came out. Vivienne stepped forward directly in front of the camera. Her face filled the laptop screen, cold, calculating, utterly unafraid. She stared directly into the lens, directly at me. You can't win, she said. Not angry, not panicked, completely, absolutely certain. You think you've trapped us? She continued, voice flat and cold. You think you've won, but you don't understand what's really happening here. You never did. Something in her tone made my blood turn to ice. She smiled. Not the practiced sweet smile I'd seen for 7 years. A different smile. Real. Knowing. Everett, she said, not looking away from the camera from me. Let's go. He hesitated. Now, she commanded. And he followed her, out of the study, through the empty house. The front door closed. On Cedric's laptop, I watched them walk to their car through the exterior camera feed. They didn't run, didn't panic. Vivian moved with complete confidence, like someone who'd just been told the rules of a game, but knew she had a card the dealer didn't know about. Cedric looked at me in the dim light of the car. What does she mean? I shook my head slowly, watching their taillights disappear down the street. I don't know, I whispered, but we're about to find out. Cedric drove in silence, his knuckles white against the steering wheel. I watched the phone screen propped between us, the warehouse camera feed showing Everett and Vivienne moving through the corridors with purpose. The two remaining hired men flanked them, one stocky with a crew cut, the other lean and nervous. Only one was actually hired. One was Officer Marcus Chen, undercover, playing his role to perfection. They're at the loading dock, Cedric said. 40 seconds to the safe room. My chest felt tight. Everything hinged on the next 5 minutes. The warrant, the recording devices, the positioning of 6 officers in that warehouse. One miscalculation and this entire trap collapsed. On screen, Vivian pushed through a rusted door. The camera switched angles. There it was, the industrial safe built into the concrete wall, exactly where I'd described it to Everett that morning. My accidental confession, my manufactured weakness. Vivian approached first, confidence radiating from every step. "The anniversary," she said, her voice clear through the feed. "He said he uses it for everything. Try it backward." Everett hesitated, then stepped forward. His fingers trembled as he spun the dial. 7, 1, 3, 0, 8, 5. He pulled the handle. The mechanism clicked. The heavy door swung open with a groan that echoed through the warehouse. Vivienne reached inside immediately, her movements sharp with anticipation. She pulled out a blue folder, then a white envelope. Nothing else. "Where's the gold?" the nervous man said behind them. "You said 2.5 million Walmsfredis." "Shut up," Vivian hissed. She tore open the envelope, her eyes scanning the contents. I'd written that letter 3 days ago, sitting at Willard's dining table while he reviewed the dual will strategy. 6 paragraphs. No anger, just facts. On screen, I watched the color drain from Vivienne's face. "What is it?" Everett said. He knew. Her voice cracked. He knew everything. "What are you—" "Everything, Everett." She thrust the letter toward him. "The supplements. The assassin. Your call from the hospital. Every goddamn word we said in that house for 3 weeks. The warehouse lights exploded on. Or Seattle police hands where we can see them. 4 cruisers surrounded the building, their blue and red lights painting the concrete walls in strobing color. Detective Hewitt's voice boomed through a megaphone as 6 officers rushed the safe room entrance, weapons drawn. Everett's hands shot up immediately. The nervous man bolted toward the loading dock, stupid, and 2 officers tackled him within seconds. Officer Chen stayed perfectly still, maintaining his cover until Hewitt gave the signal. But Vivian didn't raise her hands. Instead, she reached behind her back. "A gun," someone shouted. My heart stopped. I lurched forward in my seat, my hand gripping the phone so hard the edges cut into my palm. "Cedric!" "She's not that stupid," he said, but his voice betrayed his doubt. On screen, Vivian drew a compact pistol from a concealed holster at her waistband. The officers froze their weapons, trained on her center mass. "Don't!" Everett pleaded. "Vivian, please." "He doesn't win," she said. Her voice was cold, mechanical. "I don't lose to men like him." "You already lost," Detective Hewitt called from behind the line of officers. "Everything you said in that house is on tape. Every threat, every plan. We have it all under warrant KCC-2024-11-2847. Put the weapon down." Vivienne's hand trembled. For 3 seconds that felt like 3 hours nobody moved. Then Everett stepped in front of her. "Don't do this," he said. His back was to the officers now blocking their line of fire. "Please, I'm begging you. Whatever you're angry about, whatever you think you need to do, it's over. Just let it be over." Through the camera feed, I could see Vivienne's body go rigid. Her hand stayed near the weapon. "If you love me at all," Everett whispered, "put it down." Even through the small screen, something shifted in her expression. I couldn't name it. Something that might once have been human. She lowered the gun slowly, deliberately. An officer rushed forward and kicked it away before securing her wrists with zip ties. "He won this round," Vivian said as they pulled her toward the exit. Her eyes found the camera lens staring directly at me through the screen. But there are other rounds. Cedric turned off the phone. The car fell silent except for the distant wail of sirens. "It's done," he said. I nodded, but I couldn't speak. My son, my only child, was being placed in the back of a police cruiser. His hands were cuffed behind him. His head hung low, his shoulders shaking with sobs I couldn't hear. I'd won, so why did I feel like I'd lost everything? Cedric reached into the glove compartment and pulled out a manila folder. "There's something you need to see." "Not now?" "Yes, now." His voice was firm. He placed the folder in my lap. "Your wife's accident." "It wasn't." My hands went numb. I stared at the folder at the Seattle PD evidence label, dated 3 weeks ago, at Cedric's name, signed across the seal. "What are you talking about, Pause?" "Open it." I did. The first photo showed the undercarriage of Susan's Lexus, a close-up of the brake line. The cut was clean, deliberate, not frayed from age, not corroded, cut. The second page was a toxicology addendum, a test Seattle PD never ran during the original investigation. Scopolamine, trace amounts in Susan's preserved blood sample. The third page was a timeline. March 2016, Vivienne arranges Susan's death. March 17th, 2016, Susan dies in single vehicle accident. 2017, Vivienne meets Everett through mutual contacts. 2018, Everett introduces Vivienne to colleagues. 2019, Everett and Vivienne begin dating seriously. I couldn't breathe. "Cedric," I whispered, "how long have you known?" He stared straight ahead through the windshield. 3 days. I didn't want to tell you until we had them in custody. The sirens grew louder. An ambulance passed us heading toward the warehouse. My wife hadn't died in an accident. She'd been murdered, and Vivienne had been planning this for 3 years. The rain drummed on the roof while I read how my wife died. Cedric's car idled 3 blocks from the warehouse, the engine a low hum beneath the downpour. Blue and red lights still strobed in the distance, painting the wet pavement in rhythmic color. I held the manila folder in my lap, my hands shaking so badly the pages rustled. I turned to the next page. "Willard spent 6 months on this," Cedric said softly. "It's solid." I turned to page 4. A bank statement. December 18th, 2015. Wire transfer $5,000 from an account registered to Vivienne, Hart maiden name, Shaw, to a Tacoma auto shop called Precision Motors. The owner, one Raymond Goff, had 2 prior convictions for insurance fraud. Page 5. Traffic camera metadata from the intersection of Madison and Boren, March the 17th, 2016. The report noted Susan's vehicle showed abnormal braking response inconsistent with road conditions. The investigator at the time had attributed it to driver error. It was an error. Page 6. Hotel receipt. Capitol Hill Suites. March 11th through March 14th, 2016. Guest name V. Shaw. 4 days before Susan died, Vivienne had been in Seattle with no stated reason, no visit to our home, no mention to Everett. "Capitol Hill Hotel," I whispered. 4 days before, she planned it. Cedric's jaw tightened. Circumstantial, but the pattern is unmistakable. I flipped to page 7. Security footage stills from Precision Motors, dated December 20th, 2015. A woman in a dark coat and sunglasses entering the garage office. The timestamp, 3:14 p.m. The image quality was poor, but the build matched. The gait matched. She killed my wife to marry my son, and I'd welcomed her into my home. The realization didn't hit like a blow. It settled like weight, like concrete poured into my chest until I couldn't breathe. Susan's funeral. Vivienne standing beside Everett in a black dress, her hand on his arm, her eyes dry. I'd thought her stoic, strong for my son during his grief. She'd been watching her work. "Jerry," Cedric's voice pulled me back. "You don't have to go in there tonight. Hewitt can handle—" "No," I closed the folder. "I need to see him." "Are you sure?" I wasn't, but I opened the car door anyway. The rain soaked through my jacket before I'd taken 3 steps. The warehouse loomed ahead, its metal siding slick and black. 2 patrol cars remained parked outside their lights, off now, engines silent. An officer I didn't recognize stood by the entrance, his uniform dark with rain. "Sir," he said as I approached, "crime scene still active?" "Dam, the course is sicked." Detective Hewitt cleared me. He hesitated, then stepped aside. Inside the warehouse smelled of oil and rust and something sharper, fear maybe, or adrenaline. The overhead lights buzzed, casting harsh shadows across the concrete floor. Vivian was gone, already transported to King County Jail. The two hired men gone. Officer Chen gone, his cover intact for future operations. Only Everett remained. He sat on the floor near the safe room entrance, his back against the wall, his hands cuffed in front of him. His head hung low. When he heard my footsteps, he looked up. His eyes were red. "Ooh, Dad." I stopped 6 feet away, close enough to see him clearly, far enough that I wouldn't reach for him. "Did you read the letter?" I asked. He nodded, every word. "Then you know." "I know." His voice cracked. "I know what she planned, what she tried to do. I know." He closed his eyes. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "Your mother didn't die in an accident," I said. The words felt like glass in my throat. "Vivian killed her." Everett's eyes snapped open. "What?" 2 years ago, January. The brake line was cut, scopolamine in her blood. Vivian checked into a Capitol Hill hotel 4 days before it happened. Paid a mechanic with a fraud record $5,000 3 weeks earlier. The color drained from his face. "No, Dad. I swear I didn't know. I swear on everything." "How do you forgive the unforgivable and still walk away?" I believed him. That was the worst part. I looked into my son's eyes, the same eyes that used to light up when I came home from work, the same eyes that had cried on my shoulder when his goldfish died at age 7, and I believed him. He hadn't known, but it didn't matter. "Cooperate fully," I said. My voice didn't shake. I wouldn't let it. "Tell Detective Hewitt everything Vivian said, everything she planned, every detail you remember. I'll speak to the prosecutor. I'll tell them you were manipulated. That's all I can give you." Dad, please." 3 to 4 years if you cooperate," I continued. 15 if you don't. Your choice." I turned toward the exit. "Dad." I kept walking. "Dad, wait, please." My hand touched the warehouse door, cold metal, rain still drumming beyond it. "Hey, Dad." His voice broke on the third call. Shattered. The sound a child makes when the world ends. I pushed the door open. Rain hit my face. The patrol officer stood smoking a cigarette under the eave, his back turned. I walked past him down the gravel drive toward Cedric's car. Behind me, through the warehouse's rain-streaked window, I saw Everett collapse forward in his handcuffs, his shoulders shaking. I didn't look back. Cedric didn't speak on the drive home, and I was grateful. The streets were empty at 1:15. Rain tapped the windshield. We passed the all-night diner on Denny, its neon open sign flickering red. Cedric pulled into my driveway, but left the engine running. "You want me to come in?" "No, thank you, for everything." I walked to the front door, keys heavy in my hand. The house was dark, empty. I turned on the entry light and stood dripping rainwater onto the hardwood, the coat rack, the umbrella stand Susan had bought at Pike Place Market. Everything looked the same, but felt different. The living room sofa still showed an indentation where Everett had slept 3 weeks ago. I touched the cushion. Cold. The kitchen counter where Vivienne placed the supplement bottles was bare, now wiped clean by forensics. The tablecloth from Tuesday's dinner, where I'd described my elaborate dream, lay folded over the dining chair, unwashed, marked with wine and butter stains. I moved through the rooms like a ghost in my own house. In the study, the laptop sat closed, the one that had shown me the video feed, the one through which I'd watched my son's face when he understood I'd trapped him. I didn't turn it on. Instead, I walked to the mantel. Susan's photograph sat in its silver frame, exactly where I'd placed it after the funeral. She smiled, her eyes bright, her hand shading her face from the sun, the San Juan Islands. Our last trip together before Vivian killed her. "I did it," I whispered. "I got them, but I lost him too." Susan's smile didn't change. "Was it worth it?" My voice cracked. "Tell me it was worth it." The house remained silent, and then something inside me broke. Not the controlled anger I'd maintained for 3 weeks, not the strategic coldness I'd needed. This was the grief I'd been holding back since Cedric handed me that manila folder, since I'd read Brake Line Cut and Scopolamine Traces and March 17th, 2016. I sank to the floor and wept, not quiet tears, full wrenching sobs that tore from my chest. I cried for Susan for 8 years, believing her death was an accident, for conversations we'd never have, for grandchildren she'd never meet. I cried for Everett, for the boy he'd been, for the man he could have become, for the son I'd lost to prison and my own choice to walk away. I cried for 8 years of illusion, for welcoming a murderer into my home, for teaching her where we kept the spare key and which days I played golf and how much I was worth. For every family dinner where she'd sat across from me and smiled. The sobs quieted, my throat ached, my face felt swollen. I pressed my forehead against the cool hardwood and closed my eyes. Sleep took me there on the floor with Susan's photograph, watching from above. I woke on the hardwood floor, neck stiff, face swollen, and for one moment forgot why. Then I remembered. Sunlight streamed through the windows, rare for Seattle in late July. Mid-morning, I'd slept for hours. The house is mine again, I thought. And it's empty. 3 weeks passed in a blur of statements and signed affidavits. Detective Hewitt kept me updated. Everett had cooperated fully. The prosecutor offered him a plea deal. Vivian received the same offer. She refused. The plea hearing was scheduled for August 13th. Willard called the night before and asked if I wanted him there. I said yes. King County Superior Court smelled like old wood and anxiety. Courtroom 3 was smaller than I'd expected. A few reporters sat in the back row. I recognized one from the Seattle Times. Willard sat beside me in the second row. We didn't speak. The bailiff called us to rise. Judge Patricia Valdez entered from her chambers, a woman in her late 50s with steel gray hair, pulled back in a tight bun, and reading glasses on a chain. She'd been on the bench 23 years, Willard had told me. Fair, but firm. "Be seated," she said. 2 deputies brought Everett in. Orange jumpsuit hands cuffed. His hair was shorter, his face thinner. He didn't look at me once during the entire proceeding. His public defender, a young man named Marcus Flynn, stood and entered the guilty plea. Conspiracy to commit extortion. Elder financial abuse. The words felt distant, clinical, like they were happening to someone else's son. Judge Valdez reviewed the cooperation agreement. "Mr. Hart, you've provided substantial assistance to the state's investigation. I'm sentencing you to 4 years with parole consideration after 2. Your cooperation was noted. Do you understand?" "Yes, Your Honor," Everett said, barely audible. The deputies led him away. He didn't look back. 5 minutes later, they brought Vivian in. She wore a gray suit, hair pulled back, no makeup. She looked smaller than I remembered, but her posture was straight, chin raised. The prosecutor, a woman named Sarah Brennan, who'd handled white-collar crime for 15 years, addressed the court. "Your Honor, Ms. Hart has declined all plea offers. The state will proceed to trial on charges of conspiracy to commit murder, elder financial abuse, forgery, and brandishing a weapon. We request trial within 60 days. October 7th, Judge Valdez said. Jury selection begins at 9 a.m. Vivian's attorney nodded. "We'll be ready, Your Honor." Additionally, Brennan continued, "The state is filing a separate vehicular homicide investigation regarding the January 2022 death of Susan Hart. We expect formal charges within 6 to 8 months." Vivian's expression didn't change, but as the deputies prepared to escort her out, she turned in her seat. Her eyes found mine across the courtroom. They were flat, empty, not angry, not regretful, just cold and assessing, like she was memorizing my face for later use. Then they led her away. Outside the courthouse, the August heat pressed down like a weight. Willard loosened his tie as we walked down the granite steps. "You did the right thing," he said. "I only know I'm done." Willard's expression shifted. He pulled his phone from his pocket, frowned, then handed it to me. A text message from an unknown number. "Tell Jerry this isn't over. V." The message had arrived 7 minutes ago while we were still inside. "How did she—" Willard began. "I don't know," I said, but somewhere in King County Jail, Vivian was still playing her game, and she wanted me to know she hadn't conceded. I brought 3 manila folders to Willard's office on an October morning. 2 months had passed since Vivian's text. 2 months of Detective Hewitt investigating how she'd sent it, a burner phone smuggled in, he'd eventually discovered confiscated 3 days later. 2 months of waiting for her trial date. 2 months of waking up in an empty house and deciding what to do with the rest of my life. The folders sat on Willard's mahogany desk between us. He looked at them, then at me. "You're sure about this?" he asked. "I'm sure." He opened the first folder. His eyes scanned the document, then widened. 70% of Hart Logistics shares transferred to an employee ownership trust. "Jerry, that's 240 employees," I said. "Most of them have been with the company for over a decade. They built it as much as I did. This is nearly everything. You're giving away your life's work." "My life's work was supposed to be family," I said. "This is just money." Willard set down the first folder and opened the second. He read in silence for a long moment. $15 million to Seattle Children's Hospital Foundation, he said quietly. The Susan Hart Fund. For pediatric cancer research, I said. Susan volunteered there for 6 years before I stopped. Before. Willard nodded. He didn't need me to finish. He opened the third folder. This one took him longer to read. When he looked up, his expression was complicated surprise mixed with something that might have been approval. $2 million for Everett, he said. Irrevocable trust, dispersed upon release and completion of 2 years of psychological counseling. And Susan would have wanted it, I said. What good is an empire if there's no one left to share it with? He doesn't deserve this, Willard said carefully. You understand that? I do. Then why? I looked out the window. Pioneer Square stretched below the streets busy with lunch hour traffic. Somewhere out there, people were living ordinary lives, going to work, coming home to families, not plotting revenge or setting traps or watching their sons get led away in handcuffs. Because Susan loved him, I said, and because I can't carry this weight anymore. Willard leaned back in his chair. You're keeping what, $5 million the house? The house is already listed. I'm keeping $3 million. It's more than I'll ever need. Where will you go? And somewhere quiet, I said. Somewhere with fewer ghosts. Willard gathered the 3 folders. I'll have these executed by Friday. The hospital will be thrilled. The employees, Jerry, you're changing 240 lives. Good, I said. That's something. 6 days later, I sat at my desk in the Queen Anne house and pulled out a sheet of plain stationery. The evening light slanted through the study windows, casting long shadows across the hardwood. Outside October, rain tapped against the glass, the steady, familiar rhythm of Seattle autumn. I unscrewed the cap of my fountain pen, the same one Susan had given me on our 20th anniversary. The pen felt heavier than any business contract I'd ever signed. I'd tried email first, typed 3 drafts, and deleted them all. Then I remembered the letters I used to write Susan in our early dating years, before cell phones, before instant messages. Handwritten, permanent, real. That's what Everett deserved. Not pixels on a screen, words in ink. I put pen to paper. Yes, Everett, I don't know if you'll read this. I don't know if you want to hear from me. But I'm writing anyway because there are things I need to say. I keep thinking about the summer you turned 6. You wanted to learn to ride a bike without training wheels. You fell 17 times that afternoon in the driveway, skinned both knees, scraped your palms, got a bruise on your hip the size of a baseball. You got up 18 times. Your mother wanted me to put the training wheels back on, said you'd try again when you were older, but you wouldn't let me. You got back on that bike and rode it down the street like you'd been doing it your whole life. That's the son I remember. I remember your college graduation. Your mother cried. I pretended I didn't. You looked so proud in that cap and gown holding your diploma like it was a trophy. You'd worked 2 jobs to help pay tuition even though we told you not to. You wanted to earn it yourself. I remember the first time you drove to Portland alone. You called from a rest stop an hour in just to say you'd made it past Olympia safely. Your mother laughed and said you were 23 years old. You didn't need to check in. But I was glad you did. These are the memories I'm choosing to keep. I won't write about the trial. I won't write about that night at the warehouse. Those things happened and we both have to live with them. But they don't have to be the only things we remember. You're my son. That doesn't change. I don't know where we go from here, and I don't know if you'll ever want to see me again. But when you get out, if you want to find me, I'll be here. Willard has set up a trust for you. $2 million available after you complete counseling. Not because you deserve it. I'm not sure either of us deserves anything anymore, but because your mother would have wanted you to have a chance to start over. Use it well. I love you. I'm angry at you. I grieve for you. All of those things are true at the same time. Dad. I folded the letter and slid it into an envelope. Wrote Everett's name and the prison address in careful block letters. Sealed it. The envelope sat on the entry table, ready for Cedric to mail in the morning. I walked back to my study and stood in the doorway for a moment, looking at the desk, where I'd read Cedric's reports, where I'd planned the trap, where I'd watched my son through a laptop screen and felt my heart break. Then I turned off the desk lamp. The room fell into darkness. I stood there, letting my eyes adjust, feeling the weight of 8 months finally lift from my shoulders. I climbed the stairs to my bedroom, lay down on the bed without undressing, closed my eyes. For the first time since July, since that morning, I'd climbed into Cedric's Uber and felt the doors lock. Sleep came immediately. Not the sleep of exhaustion, the sleep of peace. I brought white roses to Susan's grave on a December morning. 5 months had passed since that night in the warehouse. 5 months since I'd walked away from my son and felt my heart break. 5 months of slow, careful rebuilding. Lakeview Cemetery sat on a hill overlooking Lake Union, the water gray-blue under winter clouds. Cherry trees lined the paths, bare now, but beautiful in their dormancy. Susan's headstone was simple granite, just her name and dates and the words she'd chosen herself years ago. She lived with kindness. I placed the roses at the base of the stone and sat on the cold ground beside her. "You were right," I said quietly. "From the beginning, I didn't listen. A crow called from somewhere in the trees. Wind rustled the bare branches. You said something felt wrong about her, the way she watched too carefully, the way she asked too many questions about the business, about the house, about everything. You said it so gently I thought you were just being protective of Everett. But you knew." I traced her name with my finger. The granite was cold. "The Susan Hart Fund went live last month," I said. "Seattle Children's Hospital sent me a photo last week. A 4-year-old girl named Emma had successful heart surgery. The fund paid for it. There's a picture of her smiling in her hospital bed, holding a teddy bear twice her size." I pulled the photo from my jacket pocket and propped it against the headstone. "You'd like that most, I think. Not the revenge, not the justice. Just this. A child who gets to grow up because your name means something good now." Footsteps crunched on the gravel path behind me. I didn't turn around. "Take your time," Cedric said softly. "Flight doesn't board for another hour." I nodded. He waited a respectful distance away. She'd be proud of what you built in her name," he said after a moment. "I hope so," I said. I stood slowly, my knees protesting the cold. I touched the top of Susan's headstone one last time. "I'll send you a postcard," I whispered. Then I turned and walked down the hill with Cedric toward the car. SeaTac Airport looked different in daylight. No rain, no darkness, no locked doors or assassins or fear. Just morning sun streaming through the terminal windows, and the ordinary bustle of travelers dragging suitcases and checking phones and buying overpriced coffee. The same airport where my life nearly ended became the gateway to what comes next. Cedric stood with me in front of the departures board. Seattle to Reykjavik, Iceland. Departure 09:15. Gate C7. She wanted to see the northern lights, I said. We kept postponing for work, board meetings, acquisitions, always something more important. "You've earned it," Cedric said. "More than earned it." I looked at him, at this man who'd saved my life, who'd driven me through Seattle's dark streets while I read about my wife's murder, who'd stood beside me through everything that came after. "Thank you," I said, "for all of it." He shook his head. "You did the hard part." "We both know that's not true." He smiled slightly. "Mrs. Susan would be proud of you." I had to look away. "I hope you're right." "I am," he said. "Now go, see those lights for her." We shook hands. Then, because it felt right, I pulled him into a brief embrace. "If Everett writes back," I started. "I'll forward it," Cedric said. "Wherever you are." I picked up my carry-on and walked towards security. There's a lesson in all of this if you're willing to hear it. My biggest mistake: I loved my son without teaching him to stand alone. I built an empire to pass on, but never taught him the value of what was being passed. I gave him everything except the tools to handle adversity, to recognize manipulation, to understand that comfort can be a trap. If you're a parent, teach your children to fail, to fall, to stand back up. Don't shield them from hardship, prepare them for it. Let them earn what they receive. Let them learn that love and trust are not the same as blindness. If someone you love makes you uncomfortable, listen to that feeling. Susan knew. She felt it in her gut, the way you feel a storm coming before the clouds arrive. She mentioned it once, maybe twice. So softly I dismissed it as worry. I told myself she was being overprotective. I told myself Vivian was perfect for Everett. I was wrong. Protect yourself even from those you love. Trust, yes, but verify. Love with your whole heart, but keep your eyes open. There's no shame in caution. There's no weakness in boundaries. And if the worst happens, if you find yourself trapped in your own life, surrounded by people who want you dead, remember this. You're stronger than you think, smarter than they believe, capable of more than they've planned for. But also remember, revenge is a hollow victory if it's the only thing you win. The things that matter are simpler. A child named Emma with a teddy bear, a fund that carries your wife's name and saves lives, the courage to write a letter offering forgiveness even when you're not sure it will be accepted, the strength to walk away from an empire you spent 40 years building because you finally understand what's worth keeping. I'm 60 years old. I've lost my wife, my son, and most of my fortune. I've survived a murder plot and destroyed the people who tried to kill me. And yet, sitting in this departure lounge with a one-way ticket to Iceland in my hand, I feel something I haven't felt in years. Hope. The gate agent calls for boarding. I stand, gather my things, and join the line. Somewhere over the Atlantic, I'll cross into a new day, a new chapter, maybe eventually a new version of myself that carries these scars but isn't defined by them. The aurora borealis in Iceland is beautiful in December. Susan was right as always. And to you listening to my story, remember this family betrayal isn't something we want to believe is possible, but sometimes the people closest to us are the ones we need to watch most carefully. My biggest mistake was loving my son without teaching him to stand on his own. I gave him everything except resilience. I ignored my wife Susan's warnings about Vivian because I wanted to believe the best. I chose comfort over caution, and it cost me everything: my wife, my son, and nearly my life. Don't make my mistake. Teach your children resilience, not just success. Listen when your gut tells you something's wrong, even about family. Family betrayal happens when we love without boundaries, when we trust without verification. The most dangerous threats often come from inside our own homes. I believe God put me through this for a reason, so I could share this lesson with you. What healed me wasn't revenge. It was honoring Susan's memory through the Susan Hart Fund, and finally letting go. Protecting yourself from family betrayal sometimes means setting boundaries with people you love deeply. That's not cruelty, that's wisdom. If this story resonated with you, drop a comment below. What would you have done? If you know someone dealing with difficult family dynamics, please share this. And for more stories about standing strong when life tests you, subscribe to Revenge Dad. Thank you for staying until the very end. One final note. While the heart of this story is real, some details have been adapted for storytelling and privacy. The lesson remains the same.